Okay, hi everyone. So this is the final video installment. Okay, so then I'm just gonna show you the overall structure. So then this written example is about 8 pages long. All right. So this is the cover page. So this is what the cover page is going to look like. So you're gonna write your full name here at the top. You're gonna write the course number, all right, and then you're going to add if you're in section 30, 32, or 40. And then you're going to provide the term and the year that you wrote this manuscript. Then you're going to write my name, Professor Angel Valdivia. And then you're going to write CSU Dominguez Hills, California. Okay. And then, so that's the first page. And then the second page is this is the abstract. All right. So you're going to write abstract at the top. And then you're going to write a paragraph. And this is what, well, I'll read it later on. And then from the abstract, then that's where you start your essay. All right. So here's the introduction. So it's about one, two, or a page and a half. All right. And then the issue section. This is about 2 paragraphs. All right, because I decided to do two issues, social and political. All right, and then from the issues, here's the 1 paragraph for the purpose. Okay. And then the lit review. So here's the literature review. So this is about, let's see, one like 1 page. Okay, but this would be much more extensive. So when you actually write out the literature review is going to be at least um 2 to 3 pages long. Right? Yeah, about yeah three. Yeah, no, sorry, about 3 to 4 pages long. Okay, because you want to be able to develop your points and make the claim, the warrants, the reasoning, and making sure that your ideas are well integrated, not only in the lit review but also throughout the essay itself. Okay, so then this is the lit review, and then here's the significance. Okay, and then here's the outcome. All right. And then the works cited page is the last page. All right. So then that's the 8 pages in total. Okay. So then here's the introduction. And if you refer to the handout, point number 1 is this sentence right here. The object of study for this research proposal will be society and crime. So this is the general category of understanding. Okay. And that's all you need to write to open the introduction. All right. That's if it's also if you decide to do it either to do the introduction last or to do the introduction first. All right. But you decide how you're going to go about doing that. And then from society is all the way up to the end of the paragraph is explaining the imagery that society is crimogenic, meaning that society crimogenic means that the structure society creates the conditions for crime to happen. And then crime has been used to influence crime policy and regulate public programs like financial support for the poor or acquiring healthcare. Crime is used as a political foil to garner generalized fear, to keep unworthy recipients from governmental services, and you could say more stuff like that. But that's sort of like the imagery that I was trying to convey to the reader, right? So that's point number 2, and then the following is explain to your reader how you selected it. So then this is what I wrote here. This research proposal will focus on crime in society and public policy because dating back to the Richard Nixon administration, crime has been used to dictate public policy. The Nixon administration called drug use public enemy number 1 on June 17th, 1971. At first appearance, this seems reasonable, classifying drug as an enemy to society rhetorically, who is not in favor of criminalizing drug use. Okay. So then that's sort of explaining why I selected it, right? Let's see. And the crucial question has to be asked about the question of drug use. Which communities tends to use drugs? Um, to society's understanding at the time, criminals, social derelicts, and the Black Panther Party and counterculture movement supporters were classified as criminals because of their, it should be their perceived drug use. And this is sort of the moment in time in time where drugs was a way to regulate public behavior, right? But then also what would happen is that the drug policy from the Nixon administration was used to disrupt challenges to government actions taken at the time. And then, sorry, let me go back to the handout. Uh, yeah, sorry, because I'm looking at number 4. That's actually the next one. So then, the war on the poor, and this led to the mass incarceration of the poor with an overrepresentation of black and brown bodies in the prison industrial complex. Okay. And then the next one is explain to your reader why reading your research is essential. Provide a reason why a person should consider reading the manuscript. So selecting this topic came about because the United States, despite claiming every person in the United States is innocent until proven guilty, um, I should have wrote, has not always uh, been the case for vulnerable, communities. Okay. Yeah, sorry about that typo. And then looking at the prison population in the United States, it is the wealthiest country in the world, but it has the largest proportion of its population in prison. For example, the current prison population in the United States is about 230 million incarcerated. When disaggregated into 100,000 per population, the United States outpaces comparable nation states. And then I wrote here in the parenthetical comment, refer to table 1. All right, so then this is table 1. So here you see country, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 countries, and then population per 100,000. So then you'll notice that the United States incarcerates 531 people out of per 100,000 people. The next closest country is England and Wales, which is a county in Great Britain. They have 146 people per 100,000 who are incarcerated. And then Australia, well, actually, I should have reversed it. Australia is the second with 158 per 100,000. And then Great Britain or England should be third at 146. All right. Which I just realized right now. And then you notice, then Canada has 85 people per 100,000, and Germany has 67. You're right. So despite the United States being the richest country and the like cultural mantra that all people are considered innocent until proven guilty, has not always been given the benefit of the doubt to vulnerable communities. Right. So then you'll notice, like right after this uh, parenthetical comment where it says refer to table 1, I wrote, the table shows how the United States, despite being a wealthy country and having a national mantra of people being innocent until proven guilty in a court of law, has not limited the mass incarceration of its citizens. Right. And this is the proof to sort of indicate, to substantiate and convince the reader about this point. Okay, and that is point number 4. Oh no, sorry. Here, this is point number 4. All right. Yeah, this is all part number 3. Okay, sorry about that. I'm getting tired. Now, point number 4 is this one. By reading the manuscript, readers will understand how the United States became a carceral society by using crime to guide and make general policy directions to regulate non criminal behavior. It is expected that a reader will develop an understanding of how crime has been politicized. It is no longer viewed to protect society. Confinement, sorry, that should not, there, that's the quote. Had the quotation mark separated too far from the sentence. Okay. And then confinement today is a multi-billion-dollar industry, right? So then this is also part of this right here is point number 5. Explain to your reader what insights they would gain, right? So then now prison is a money making endeavor, right? And you probably heard in other sociology classes discuss the privatization of prisons. And that's one of the consequences because the prison system has been privatized, meaning that the state does not necessarily provide the full supportive services that a prison needs, but the state has contracted out to private companies to provide services for the inmates. Right. So that is what is meant by the privatization of the prison system or the penal system. Okay. And that's sort of point number again 4 and 5. And then this section right here is actually point number 6. Explain to your reader the position, and this is what I wrote. This study aligns with the critical literature interrogating the process of how crime has been politicized, which makes society less safe and more costly, not only for society, but for specific communities where Black and Brown bodies are criminalized and thrown into a maze of legal, political, and financial obstacles and burdens. Right. So, like, that's sort of the general understanding of over incarceration and the over policing of poor working class communities of color. All right. Now, your introduction doesn't necessarily have to be this extensive or this long, but this is just an example of how you're going to go about writing it and then writing out each section and then addressing the points. Okay. But you notice also, sorry, you also notice that that the themes are consistent throughout writing, right? Meaning that looking at confinement, imprisonment, the prison system, the idea of criminality, public policy. So those are the words and terms you want to be using throughout the course of your essay. Okay. Now, and then the next part, once you finish writing the introduction, then you're going to write Roman numeral 2, the issue section. And for this, this is what I wrote. This study will approach the topic of crime in society as a social and political issue. And then I continue to write a reason why this research proposal will frame the topic of crime in society as a social issue is because, sorry about the typo, of the broad perspective of criminalizing members of poor working class communities of color. Because people who live in these communities face discrimination and suspicion from outside the community's boundaries. The criminalization process implicates people who go to work, pay their bills as best as they can, and mind their own business. In the United States, poverty is classified as a crime. At the same time, people who engage in delinquent behavior are meant to be labeled as delinquents. Because the term criminal is used as a blanket commentary ensnaring every member of the community under the auspices of a carceral society. So basically, this paragraph is explaining that because of the extensive practice of over policing these communities, it has a negative impact where every member of the hood or barrio is considered a potential criminal. Even though that not everyone in the hood or barrio participates in delinquent behavior, just by the mere fact that they live in that specific location, they are also spoiled, or their identity is also spoiled just by the mere fact that they live in that location. Right. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay. And then the following or the second paragraph is how and this is what I wrote. Sorry. The other issue framing this topic is political. The understanding of crime has changed over the past 6 decades. The first step in redefining crime from delinquent behavior began with Richard Nixon's administration. Sorry, that should be capitalized. When it took the leap, another leap forward. Oh, sorry, administration. Then it took another leap forward with Ronald Reagan's administration with the war on drugs and the era of mass incarceration, accelerated under Bill Clinton's administration. For example, under the Clinton administration, welfare was transformed from a government program supporting needy families, and it was changed to temporary assistance for needy families, or TANF. And a provision of TANF is to have, sorry, recipients work for government assistance. Families are placed on 60 months or 5 years of receiving benefits, and some states have augmented the time frame depending on the mitigating circumstances. So then, this was a specific moment in U.S. history in terms of politics, crime, and welfare that people needed to be more responsible for themselves and try to break the cycle of poverty that allegedly the welfare program instilled, right? However, what TANF did, it actually helped benefit corporations more than the people who receive the public assistance, because now what happens is that the government pays half of the salary of the person who's working for, let's say, someone for the company like Walmart or Target. So let's just say that minimum wage in California is $10. So then the federal government would pay $5 an hour, and then Walmart would pay $5 an hour, but they're actually saving 50% of their expenses to paying to that particular worker. Right. So it's actually been more beneficial for transnational corporations than for the family receiving public assistance. All right. And then once the 60 months are up, the family can no longer remain on TANF unless states have provided uh, um, a petition to be able to continue TANF. All right. But that's also dictated by the state. Okay. All right. So hopefully that makes sense. And then now I'm going to refer to the purpose. So then it's going to be a paragraph. Okay. So the purpose of this research proposal is to better understand how crime has become politicized. So you notice I only picked one, better understand. Okay. And this is what I wrote. The politicization of crime has undermined the idea of public safety. It has monetized the confinement of people from poor working class communities of color and has criminalized members from these vulnerable areas. The politicization of crime has redefined the understanding of criminal activity by lowering the bar of criminality. For example, of lowering the bar of criminality is lowering the amount of an item to a felony crime. Um, uh, because in California, a robbery can be charged as a felony if the item costs equal to or more than $950. You're right. And before, because I couldn't remember exactly and I couldn't find this information, before it used to be like $1,500. But in the mid 1990s, the value went from $1,500 to $950. But in contrast, in Texas, the amount for an item stolen and to be classified as a felony, is $2,500. Right. So even though Texas is a much more conservative state, they still have a higher threshold of what can be considered a felony theft compared to the state of California, which is a democratically dominated state. And then here's my parenthetical in text parenthetical citation that I accessed this information from South California Law Group website, access December 6, 2024, and then that is the website. And the amount varies from state to state. All right, but you'll notice this is just one paragraph. Okay, and then, like I mentioned, you're going to copy this from the handout or the prompt to write the essay. All right, and then everything else is just your understanding of your particular topic. Okay, and then once you're done with the purpose, then you're going to go to the literature review. Okay, and then this is the point number one. The study will critically approach the subject of crime and society. All right, because remember, you have the four different choices of in favor, critical, balanced, and lamenting. All right. So then this is what I wrote in terms of, sorry, just looking at the handout. Yeah, writing your introductory paragraph. So then I wrote, this research proposal adopts a critical stance because the politicization of crime distorts not only the understanding of crime, but has also created a carceral society where people from vulnerable communities can be criminalized and snatched by the penal system, making these communities more dangerous for all residents involved in the unfortunate process of criminalization. So you'll notice that I'm running with the theme of criminalization, what I mentioned here in the purpose, as well as in the issue section, and somewhat referred to here in the introduction, but as a much broader context. Right. So then this is how I want you to write your essay, right? Making sure that it's cohesively structured and logically structured. Okay. So let me go back to the introduction. Okay. And then that's point number one. And then point number two is the theoretical approach this research proposal will adopt is conflict theory, right? And this is what I meant by you don't necessarily need to do any specific research on conflict theory, but just understand what are the main premise or what are the main premises or assumptions of conflict theory. So conflict theory is adopted because it offers a critical perspective of how power flows and operates in society. To redefine criminal behavior and to support the increased process of incarceration takes power. The use of this powers undermines the spatial integrity of vulnerable communities. All right. Yeah. So because of the over policing and the mass incarceration, it actually hurts the community more than it actually helps because it helps create a power vacuum. So this allows the younger generation to participate in delinquent criminal behavior, but there's a lack of an older generation to try to regulate their behavior and regulate what they're engaging in. So it actually makes the neighborhood much more dangerous and less safe. Okay. While at the same time, corporations make billions of dollars from families from these communities because of how much they're able to charge people when they use the phone or because their family member or friend or their loved ones is in a prison that's like in rural areas, so then it takes resources, time, and money to be able to go visit their family members. And then on top of that, they also have to put money in their books where they're able to buy and purchase items at the commissary that's inside the prison itself. So it becomes so the prison becomes a money making endeavor or enterprise at the expense of economically struggling communities. So that's what I meant by this. Okay. And then the argument that will delimit or frame the object of study is to disrupt the unfortunate process of criminalization and forming a carceral society, regulating poor working class communities of color, and to use crime data to manage better rather than allowing ideological structures to determine crime and how to regulate it. Right. And that's actually point number point number three. Right. So this is point number three right here. Okay. And then this is point number four. A concept that will be used is Law and Order by Jonathan Simon. Okay. And then Simon in 2007 explains how the term law and order is inappropriate because it is ahistorical, right? Because law and order has been associated with public safety, but in the current period, this term obfuscates rather than reveals the politicization of crime control. Right, because the idea of law and order gives the impression that people are following the law and that it's being applied equally among different communities and members of society. But the data shows, excuse me, but the data shows that that's not necessarily true because of the overrepresentation of black and brown bodies within the prison system. Okay. And then this is sort of what I wrote as a parenthetical comment. Under the last paragraph, which is this right here, is when you begin to write your entire lit review. Be sure to use what you have done for the class for this term, meaning use the things that I've showed and the assignments that you've used by integrating your ideas with your evidence and your claims and providing a clear and well defined context. Okay. And then reference, but you are not required to cite text from the class, right? So I want you to reference the books, right, in terms of how to structure your sentences, your paragraphs, and also your arguments and context, but you're not required to cite them, because use them more as tools and guidelines. Okay, but I definitely want you to use the sources you collected to help you write out your lit review and provide the appropriate citations and quotes to help support and convince your reader of the claim you're wanting them to evaluate and to accept. Okay. Now, um, and this is basically what I said earlier. Use the text as tools to help clarify and convey the points you want the reader to understand. And then do not forget to provide a context for your essay and how to integrate the points you want to make. Defend yourself intellectually and be strategic when using empirical evidence to support and convince your reader. All right. So then this is like a specific structure. And then this is just sort of encouraging you to make sure that you're able to integrate a lot of these points into a well integrated argument. All right. And then and this, as I mentioned before, the lit review would be about 3 to 4 pages long. Okay. And that's enough room to be able to treat each of your sources properly. Okay. Now, and then the significance. This research proposal aligns with the existing literature on society and crime. A shared understanding of the politicization of crime is that it can be traced back to the Nixon administration and followed up by both Republican and Democratic presidential administrations. Crime has been defined along ideological lines rather than crime data. Fear has been used to change society's view towards crime. This change has had a detrimental impact on society by instilling distrust, suspicion, and fear to the point that people think crime is rampant in society. Still, crime data has shown that has declined for the past 4 decades, with a few notable exceptions like robbery, right, which has gone up. Like exception like robbery which has gone up, right? And then if and that's how you're going to write the significance, right? And I just realized that I forgot to put another benefit or significance